Sarah Martinez stepped through the heavy glass doors of Iron Wolf Gym, her gym bag slung over her shoulder and her heart pounding with nervous excitement. The smell of rubber mats, sweat, and determination filled the air as she took in the sight before her. The warehouse-style building housed one of the most respected mixed martial arts training facilities in the state, with multiple fighting cages, heavy bags hanging like silent sentinels, and the constant rhythm of gloves hitting pads echoing throughout the space. At 24 years old, Sarah looked more like a college student than someone seeking to join one of the toughest gyms in the region. Standing at 5 feet 6 inches with a slender build, her appearance often led people to underestimate her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore basic workout clothes that had seen better days. Nothing about her screamed fighter, which was exactly how she preferred it. The gym's reputation preceded it. Iron Wolf had produced several professional fighters who had gone on to compete in major organizations. It was known for its no-nonsense approach to training and its ability to separate those who were serious about fighting from those who were just looking for a fitness trend. The owner, Tank, was a former heavyweight contender who had built the gym's culture around respect, discipline, and the understanding that everyone who walked through those doors had something to prove. Sarah approached the front desk, where a muscular woman with short hair was reviewing paperwork. The nameplate read, Jenny Cooper, Assistant Manager. Jenny looked up with a friendly smile that immediately put Sarah at ease. "First time here?" Jenny asked, setting down her pen. "Yes, I called yesterday about the trial membership," Sarah replied, trying to keep the nervousness out of her voice. "Sarah Martinez, right? I remember. Tank's in his office if you want to meet him, but first let me show you around and explain how things work here." As they walked through the gym, Jenny pointed out the different areas. The main floor housed the competition-sized cage, surrounded by heavy bags, speed bags, and conditioning equipment. Off to one side was a separate area for grappling mats, and upstairs was a smaller room dedicated to personal training and technique work. "We have classes throughout the day, but most serious training happens during open gym hours," Jenny explained. "People form their own training groups, work with coaches, or train solo. The main rule is respect. Respect the equipment, respect the space, and respect each other. Tank doesn't tolerate drama or people who think they can coast on attitude." They paused near the main cage where a group of fighters was finishing up their morning training session. Sarah's eyes were immediately drawn to 4 men who stood out from the rest. They moved with a precision and confidence that spoke of serious training, their technique sharp, and their conditioning obvious. Even during light sparring, their military bearing was unmistakable. "Those guys are our Marines," Jenny said, following Sarah's gaze. "They train here when they're on leave or stationed locally. Good fighters, but they can be—" She paused, searching for the right word, particular about who they take seriously. The 4 Marines were finishing their session, unwrapping their hands and gathering their gear. The apparent leader of the group was a tall, broad-shouldered man with close-cropped brown hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention. His 3 companions were equally impressive, each carrying themselves with the disciplined confidence that came from years of military service. "That's Sergeant Mike Crusher," Jenny said quietly. "The guy with the dark hair is Corporal Jake Williams, the redhead is Lance Corporal Tommy Red, and the quiet one is Corporal David Silent Martinez. They've been training here for about 2 years, and they're some of our most skilled fighters." Sarah watched as the Marines moved through their post-training routine. Their technique was flawless, their conditioning evident, and their camaraderie clear. They joked with each other while maintaining the underlying discipline that marked them as professional warriors. It was exactly the kind of training environment she had hoped to find. "They look like they know what they're doing," Sarah commented. "They do, but don't let that intimidate you. Everyone starts somewhere, and Tank believes in developing fighters at all levels. The key is showing up, working hard, and proving that you belong here." After completing the tour, Jenny introduced Sarah to Tank. The gym owner was exactly what she had expected from his reputation. A bear of a man with graying hair, knuckles, and eyes that seemed to size up everyone he met. But his demeanor was surprisingly gentle as he explained the gym's philosophy. "Fighting isn't just about being tough," Tank said as they sat in his cluttered office surrounded by photos of former students and championship belts. "It's about discipline, technique, and mental strength. I've seen small fighters beat much larger opponents because they had better technique and stronger minds. Size and strength matter, but they're not everything." Sarah filled out the necessary paperwork, and paid for her trial membership. Tank assigned her to start with the beginners striking class that evening, explaining that it would give her a foundation before she moved into more advanced training. "One piece of advice," Tank said as she prepared to leave. "Don't try to prove yourself on your first day. Learn the basics, follow instructions, and earn your place here through consistent work. The fighters who last are the ones who understand that respect is earned, not given." Sarah spent the rest of the day thinking about what lay ahead. She had trained in martial arts before, but never in an environment like Iron Wolf. The gym's reputation for serious training meant that she would be tested in ways she hadn't experienced before. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. That evening, Sarah returned to the gym for her first class. The beginner's striking session was led by a former champion who had a gift for breaking down complex techniques into understandable components. The class consisted of about 12 people ranging in age from teenagers to middle-aged adults, all united by their desire to learn. The warm-up was more intense than Sarah had expected. 20 minutes of calisthenics, stretching, and footwork drills left her breathing hard but energized. Then moved into basic striking techniques, jabs, crosses, hooks, and kicks. Despite having trained before, Sarah focused on learning specific approach to each technique. "Fighting is like learning a language," explained as he demonstrated proper punching form. "You start with basic words, then sentences, then eventually you're speaking fluently, but you never stop learning new vocabulary." During partner drills, Sarah was paired with a college-aged man named David who was in his third week of training. They worked on basic combinations, taking turns holding pads and throwing strikes. David was enthusiastic but unpolished, his punches wild and his footwork awkward. Sarah found herself naturally adjusting her pace to help him learn, offering quiet encouragement and technical tips. "You've done this before," observed as he watched Sarah's technique. "Good form, controlled power. Where did you train?" "A little bit of everything," Sarah replied, not wanting to go into detail. "I'm here because I want to take it more seriously." The class concluded with conditioning work that left everyone exhausted but satisfied. As people gathered their gear and headed home, Sarah noticed the 4 Marines entering the gym for their evening training session. They moved through their warm-up routine with the same precision she had observed that morning, their preparation methodical and thorough. Sarah was packing her bag when she heard one of the Marines comment loudly enough for her to hear. "Look at that, guys. Another fitness enthusiast thinks she wants to learn to fight." It was the redhead Tommy speaking to his companions while looking in her direction. "Give it 2 weeks and she'll find an excuse to quit." His comment drew chuckles from the others, though Sarah noticed that the quiet one, David Martinez, didn't seem to find it particularly amusing. She felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger, but she forced herself to remain calm. Getting into an argument on her first day would prove nothing except that she couldn't control her emotions. "Ignore them," said quietly as he approached. "They say that about everyone new. The best response is to keep showing up and keep improving." Sarah nodded, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Thanks for the class. Same time tomorrow." "See you then," replied with an approving smile. As Sarah walked toward the exit, she heard Sargent speaking to his team. "New people always think they know what real training looks like until they step into the cage with someone who's actually been tested. Takes more than a few cardio classes to become a fighter." The comment stung, but it also lit a fire in Sarah's chest. She had faced dismissive attitudes before, and she knew that words were just words. What mattered was what she did in response. As she pushed through the gym doors into the cool evening air, she made a silent promise to herself. She would earn her place at Iron Wolf Gym, regardless of what anyone thought about her chances. The drive home gave her time to process the day's events. The gym was everything she had hoped it would be: serious, challenging, and filled with skilled athletes. The Marine's dismissive attitude was disappointing but not unexpected. She had encountered similar reactions throughout her life, and she had learned that the best way to change people's minds was through actions, not arguments. At home, Sarah reviewed the techniques she had learned in class, practicing her footwork in her small apartment and visualizing the combinations had demonstrated. She made notes about areas she wanted to improve and began planning her training schedule. If she was going to succeed at Iron Wolf, she would need to be strategic about her approach. Her phone buzzed with a text from her older brother Carlos, who lived across the country. "How was the new gym?" he asked. "Challenging," she replied, "but good." Remember what Dad always said, Carlos texted back. Actions speak louder than words, show them who you are. Their father had been a boxing coach who had taught both of his children that respect in the fighting world was earned through dedication, skill, and character. He had always emphasized that the most dangerous opponents were often the ones who looked least threatening, because they had learned to rely on technique and intelligence rather than intimidation. As Sarah prepared for bed, she thought about the path ahead. She knew that earning acceptance at Iron Wolf would require more than just showing up to classes. She would need to demonstrate that she belonged among serious fighters, and that meant being ready for whatever challenges came her way. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the gym early for the open training session. She wanted to observe the more advanced fighters and get a feel for the level of skill she would need to develop. The Marines were already there, working through their routine with the same methodical precision she had noticed before. She set up at a heavy bag in the corner and began her own warm-up, focusing on the techniques had taught the previous evening. Her strikes were crisp and controlled, her footwork smooth and balanced. She lost herself in the rhythm of training, each punch and kick thrown with purpose and precision. Unknown to Sarah, her training session was being observed. Tank watched from his office window, nodding her technique and work ethic. Who had arrived early to prepare for the morning classes, also took notice of the new student's dedication and skill level. After 45 minutes of solo training, Sarah began her cool-down routine. She was stretching when she heard Tommy's voice carrying across the gym. "She's got some technique, I'll give her that," he said to his companions. "But technique in practice is different from technique under pressure. Anyone can look good hitting a bag that doesn't hit back." Sergeant nodded in agreement. "That's the truth. Until someone's tested against real resistance, you don't know what they're made of." Sarah pretended not to hear the comments as she finished her stretching and packed her gear. But their words planted a seed in her mind. They were right that hitting bags and pads was different from actual fighting. The question was whether they were prepared to find out what she was really capable of when tested against live resistance. As she left the gym that morning, Sarah found herself thinking about the most valuable lesson her father had taught her. Never let anyone else define your limitations. The Marines had made assumptions about her based on her appearance and their preconceptions about who belonged in their world. It was an understandable mistake, and one she had encountered many times before. But it was also an opportunity. People who underestimated her capabilities often found themselves unprepared for what she could actually do. The key was patience and preparation. When the right moment came, she would be ready to show them exactly who they were dealing with. The foundation was being laid for a confrontation that would challenge everyone's assumptions about strength, skill, and what it really meant to be a fighter. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's first day at Iron Wolf Gym, and she had established herself as one of the most dedicated students in the beginners program. She arrived early, stayed late, and approached every training session with the focused intensity of someone who had clear goals. Her technique continued to improve under guidance, and she had begun incorporating elements from the gym's grappling program into her skill set. The morning training sessions had become her favorite part of the day. The gym was less crowded, allowing her to work on technique without distraction. She had developed a routine: 30 minutes of conditioning, 45 minutes of striking work, and 15 minutes of flexibility training. Her dedication had not gone unnoticed by the regular fighters, though reactions to her presence remained mixed. Tank had been keeping an informal eye on her progress. During a quiet moment between classes, he approached the heavy bag where she was working on combinations. "Your technique has improved significantly in 3 weeks," he observed, watching her throw a clean hook-cross-low kick combination. "Tells me you're picking up the grappling basics quickly, too." Sarah paused her training and unwrapped her hands. "I'm trying to learn as much as possible while I'm here." "Where did you train before coming to Iron Wolf?" Tank asked directly. "Your foundational skills are too solid for someone who's completely new to martial arts." Sarah had been expecting this question for weeks. Her technique and conditioning were clearly beyond what a beginner should possess, and experienced fighters like Tank could recognize the signs of serious previous training. "I trained at a small gym back home," she said carefully. "Nothing as comprehensive as this place, but I had good coaches who taught me the fundamentals." Tank nodded, sensing there was more to the story but respecting her privacy. "Well, whatever your background, you're putting in the work here. That's what matters." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the four Marines for their morning session. They moved through their warm-up routine with the same professional efficiency that Sarah had come to expect. Their training partnership was clearly built on years of working together, each knowing instinctively what the others needed to maximize their development. Sergeant Mike was working with Corporal Jake Williams on takedown defense, while Lance Corporal Tommy and Corporal David Martinez practiced striking combinations. Their skill level was impressive, and Sarah found herself studying their techniques when she thought they weren't watching. "Still checking out the Marines?" asked Jenny Cooper, who had approached while Sarah was observing the training session. "Their technique is really solid," Sarah replied. "You can tell they've put in serious time developing their skills." "They have, but don't let that intimidate you. Everyone in this gym has strengths, and everyone has areas where they can improve. The Marines are good fighters, but they're not invincible." Jenny's comment proved to be prescient when, later that week, Sarah witnessed an interaction that revealed some of the dynamics within the gym's community. A new member, a young man named Alex who had just started training, made the mistake of approaching the Marines with an overly familiar attitude. "Hey guys, mind if I jump in and train with you?" Alex asked during their grappling session. "I wrestled in high school, so I know the basics." The response was swift and educational. Sergeant accepted the request with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Within 30 seconds, Alex found himself on his back, controlled completely by superior technique and experience. The lesson was delivered professionally but unmistakably. Respect was earned through demonstrated competence, not assumed through self-proclamation. "Wrestling in high school is a good foundation," said as he helped Alex to his feet. "But there's a difference between knowing basics and being able to apply them against experienced opponents. Keep training and you'll get there." Alex nodded, clearly humbled by the experience. He spent the rest of the session working on fundamental techniques with, having learned an important lesson about the hierarchy of skill within the gym. Sarah watched the interaction with interest, noting both the Marines' willingness to teach through demonstration and their intolerance for unearned confidence. It confirmed her instinct that any confrontation with them would need to be on their terms and under circumstances where her capabilities would be undeniable. The opportunity for such circumstances began to develop during the 4th week of her membership. Tank announced that the gym would be hosting its monthly Challenge Night the following Friday. These events were informal competitions where gym members could test their skills against each other in a controlled environment. Participation was voluntary, but it was understood that serious fighters eventually tested themselves in this format. "Challenge Night is about more than winning or losing," Tank explained to the assembled group. "It's about stepping outside your comfort zone and seeing how your training holds up under pressure. Everyone who participates learns something, regardless of the outcome." The format was simple. Fighters signed up in advance and were matched based on experience level and weight class. Matches lasted 3 5-minute rounds and were judged by Tank and 2 other experienced coaches. Safety was the top priority, with matches being stopped immediately if any participant was in danger. Sarah listened to the announcement with growing excitement. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she had been waiting for. Challenge Night would provide a legitimate forum for demonstrating her capabilities without creating unnecessary drama or conflict. After the announcement, she overheard the Marines discussing their plans for the event. "I'm definitely signing up," Tommy said. "Been working on some new combinations that I want to test out." "Same here," Jake Williams agreed. "Tank always puts together good matches. You learn more in 5 minutes of live fighting than in hours of drilling." Sergeant nodded approvingly. "That's why we're here. Training has to be tested eventually, or it's just theory." David Martinez, the quietest of the group, simply nodded his agreement. Sarah had noticed that he was often the most thoughtful of the four, preferring to observe and analyze rather than comment on every situation. That evening, Sarah approached Jenny at the front desk to sign up for Challenge Night. "You sure you're ready for this?" Jenny asked, though her tone was supportive rather than discouraging. 3 weeks is pretty quick to jump into competition, even the informal kind." "I think I'm ready to test myself," Sarah replied. "Isn't that why we train?" Jenny smiled and added Sarah's name to the list. "That's the right attitude. Tank will match you with someone appropriate for your experience level." As the week progressed, anticipation for Challenge Night grew throughout the gym. Sarah increased the intensity of her training, focusing on the conditioning and mental preparation that would be crucial for competitive fighting. She spent extra time working on combinations that could be effective against larger, stronger opponents, knowing that most of her potential matches would have physical advantages. The Marines also stepped up their preparation, their training sessions taking on an even sharper edge. Sarah found herself paying closer attention to their techniques, particularly noting how they adapted their strategies based on their individual strengths and weaknesses. Was clearly the leader, with excellent takedown skills and powerful ground control. Williams was the most technically proficient striker, with clean technique and good timing. Relied on aggressive pressure and cardio, overwhelming opponents with constant forward movement. Martinez was the most well-rounded, equally comfortable standing or on the ground, but he seemed to prefer defensive strategies that allowed him to counterattack. 2 days before challenge night, Sarah was finishing her evening training when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "Did you see that the new girl signed up for challenge night?" Tommy was saying to his companions as they cooled down from their session. "Seriously?" Jake Williams responded with obvious surprise. "She's been here, 3 weeks? That's optimistic." "Tank should know better than to match her with anyone serious," added. "Girl could get hurt if she's in over her head." "Maybe it'll teach her some respect for what real fighting looks like," continued. "Some people need to learn the hard way that watching YouTube videos isn't the same as actual training." Sarah felt her jaw clench as she listened to their dismissive comments. The assumption that she was unprepared or seeking attention was both insulting and revealing. They had observed her training for weeks, but had apparently dismissed her improvement as irrelevant to actual fighting capability. David Martinez spoke up for the first time. "Maybe we shouldn't assume anything about her capabilities. She trains pretty seriously for someone who's supposedly just playing around." "Come on, Silent," replied, using Martinez's nickname. "You've seen her in class. Good technique for a beginner, but there's a difference between drilling combinations and fighting someone who's actually trying to take your head off." Nodded in agreement. "David's right that we shouldn't underestimate anyone, but Tommy has a point too. Until someone's been tested under real pressure, you don't know what they're made of." The conversation continued, but Sarah had heard enough. She finished packing her gear and left the gym, her mind racing with the implications of what she had overheard. The Marines had made it clear that they viewed her as an amateur who was in over her head. Their attitude was exactly what she had expected, but hearing it stated so bluntly was still frustrating. More importantly, their comments revealed something about their mindset that she could potentially use to her advantage. They were confident in their assessment of her capabilities, which meant they would likely be unprepared for what she could actually do if given the opportunity to demonstrate it. That night, Sarah called her brother Carlos to discuss the situation. "So they think you're just another gym tourist playing fighter?" Carlos asked after she described the Marines' comments. "Pretty much. They see me as someone who's going to get a reality check and then disappear." "And what do you think about that assessment?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. "I think they're about to learn that appearances can be deceiving." Carlos chuckled. "That sounds like something Dad would have said. Just remember what he always taught us. The best way to change someone's mind is to show them something they don't expect." The conversation with her brother reinforced Sarah's determination to make the most of challenge night. She had been underestimated before, and she had learned to view such situations as opportunities rather than obstacles. The key was remaining patient and choosing the right moment to reveal her true capabilities. Friday evening arrived with an atmosphere of excitement and nervous energy throughout Iron Wolf Gym. Challenge night had drawn a crowd that included not just the participants, but also regular members who came to watch and support their training partners. The main floor had been reconfigured to provide optimal viewing of the cage, and Tank had enlisted several experienced coaches to serve as judges and referees. Sarah arrived early and went through her pre-fight routine methodically. She had learned long ago that mental preparation was just as important as physical conditioning, and she spent time visualizing different scenarios and her responses to them. The butterflies in her stomach were familiar companions that she had learned to channel into focused energy. The 4 Marines were also present, having signed up for matches against other experienced fighters in the gym. They moved through their warm-up routines with the same professional demeanor they brought to all their training, but Sarah could sense an underlying excitement about the opportunity to compete. Tank gathered all the participants for a final briefing on rules and safety protocols. Remember, this is about testing yourselves and learning, not about proving who's toughest. I'll stop any match if I see unnecessary risk, and I expect everyone to respect my decisions. Most importantly, win or lose, you shake hands afterward and help each other improve. The evening began with matches between newer fighters, giving everyone a chance to see how the format worked and build excitement for the more experienced competitors. Sarah watched carefully, noting the difference in pace and intensity between the exhibition matches and serious training. Her own match was scheduled for the middle of the evening against another relatively new member named, a nurse in her late 20s who had been training for about 2 months longer than Sarah. Was slightly taller and had shown solid improvement in the beginner classes, making her a logical match from Tank's perspective. As the evening progressed, Sarah noticed the Marines watching the matches with professional interest, analyzing techniques and discussing strategy. When her match was announced, she heard Tommy comment to his companions. "This should be interesting. Let's see if all that practice actually translates to fighting." Sarah entered the cage with calm confidence, touching gloves with as Tank reviewed the rules one final time. As the opening bell rang, she felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with live competition. But underneath the excitement was a deeper sense of preparation that her weeks of observation and training at Iron Wolf had provided. The match would be the beginning of a dramatic shift in how everyone at the gym viewed the quiet woman who had seemed like just another fitness enthusiast, trying to learn some basic self-defense skills. The opening bell rang, and Sarah immediately demonstrated that her weeks of careful observation had been put to good use. While approached the center of the cage with the tentative movements of someone still learning to apply techniques under pressure, Sarah moved with fluid confidence that spoke of extensive experience. The first exchange revealed the true gap between the fighters, through a tentative jab, telegraphing her intention and leaving herself exposed to Sarah's counterattack. Sarah slipped the punch with minimal movement and responded with a crisp combination that connected cleanly but without excessive force. Her strikes were precise and controlled, designed to score points and demonstrate superiority rather than to inflict damage. Within 30 seconds, it was clear to everyone watching that this was not going to be the competitive match Tank had anticipated when making the pairing. Sarah's footwork was too smooth, her timing too perfect, and her understanding of distance and angles too sophisticated for someone with only 3 weeks of training at Iron Wolf. To her credit, continued to press forward and attempt to engage, but every attack she mounted was met with a defensive response that made her efforts look clumsy by comparison. Sarah would slip punches, catch kicks, and counter with strikes that landed with precision while avoiding return fire. The Marines, who had been casually watching while preparing for their own matches, began to pay closer attention as Sarah's performance contradicted all their assumptions about her skill level. "What the hell?" Tommy muttered as Sarah demonstrated a perfectly timed sprawl to defend's desperate takedown attempt, immediately transitioning to a dominant position that forced to focus entirely on defense. "That's not beginner-level grappling," Jake Williams observed, his voice carrying a note of surprise and growing respect. Sargent was quiet, but his eyes were locked on the action as he reassessed his evaluation of the woman they had all dismissed as an amateur. The technical proficiency Sarah was displaying required years of dedicated training to develop, and her composure under the pressure of competition spoke to extensive experience. David Martinez watched with particular intensity, noting not just what Sarah was doing, but how she was doing it. Her technique showed influences from multiple martial arts disciplines, integrated in a way that suggested formal training under high-quality instruction. This was not someone who had learned to fight at a casual fitness gym. The first round ended with Sarah clearly in control. She had dominated every aspect of the fight without appearing to exert maximum effort. Her breathing was still controlled, her movement remained crisp, and she showed no signs of the fatigue that was beginning to affect. During the break between rounds, Tank approached the cage with a concerned expression. "How are you feeling? Do you want to continue?" Nodded, though she was clearly struggling with the pace of the fight. "I'm okay, I want to keep going." Tank looked to Sarah, who was showing no signs of distress. "You're looking good out there. Remember, this is about learning, not proving a point." Sarah nodded her understanding, but Tank's comment revealed that he was beginning to realize there was more to her background than she had initially revealed. Her performance was too polished for someone at her supposed experience level. The second round began with attempting to change her strategy, focusing on clinch work and grappling where she hoped to negate some of Sarah's striking advantages. But this proved to be an even greater mistake. Sarah's grappling skills were, if anything, more impressive than her striking. She controlled the clinch effortlessly, using superior leverage and technique to dictate the action. When managed to initiate a takedown attempt, Sarah demonstrated why Tank's earlier observation about her grappling improvement had been an understatement. She not only defended the takedown but immediately reversed position, taking back and applying a rear naked choke with textbook technique. The submission was applied with controlled pressure, tight enough to force to tap but not so aggressively as to cause injury. As soon as tapped, Sarah immediately released the hold and helped her opponent to her feet, showing the kind of sportsmanship that Tank demanded from all his fighters. The match was officially over, but its impact was just beginning to be felt throughout the gym. The assembled crowd, which had expected to see a competitive learning experience between two relatively new fighters, had instead witnessed a systematic demonstration of advanced martial arts skills. Tank entered the cage to raise Sarah's hand and officially declare her the winner, but his expression was thoughtful rather than celebratory. "Nice work out there. We'll need to have a conversation about your training background after tonight." Sarah nodded, understanding that her performance had revealed more about her capabilities than she had originally intended. But she felt no regret about the decision to compete, had fought bravely, and deserved to be met with genuine effort rather than condescending restraint. As she exited the cage, Sarah was approached by several gym members offering congratulations and expressing surprise at her skill level. But the most significant reactions came from the four Marines, whose assumptions about her capabilities had been thoroughly demolished. "That was impressive fighting," David Martinez said as she gathered her gear. "Your technique is way more advanced than anyone realized." Sarah looked up to find all four Marines standing nearby, their expressions ranging from surprised to respectful. The casual dismissiveness that had characterized their previous comments about her was completely absent. "Thank you," she replied simply. "Fought well. She's got good instincts, just needs more time to develop them." Sergeant stepped forward, his demeanor noticeably different from their previous interactions. "I owe you an apology. We made assumptions about your background that were clearly wrong. That level of skill takes years to develop." Tommy, who had been the most vocal in his skepticism about her abilities, seemed particularly affected by what he had witnessed. "I've got to ask, where did you really train before coming here? That wasn't gym fitness class technique." Sarah considered how much to reveal. The truth was that her background was more extensive than she had let anyone believe, but she had reasons for maintaining some privacy about her past. However, the direct question from fighters she was beginning to respect deserved an honest response. "I competed at a high level before I moved here," she said carefully. "I came to Iron Wolf because I wanted to train in a serious environment without the baggage of my previous reputation." Jake Williams nodded understanding. "Makes sense. Sometimes starting fresh is the best way to keep improving." The conversation was interrupted by Tank's announcement of the next match, but the dynamic between Sarah and the Marines had fundamentally shifted. The condescending attitude based on assumptions about her experience had been replaced by genuine interest in her background and respect for her demonstrated skills. As the evening continued, Sarah watched the Marines compete in their own matches, faced off against a skilled amateur boxer and dominated through superior grappling. Williams showcased his striking skills against another experienced fighter, winning a close decision through technical superiority, overwhelmed his opponent with relentless pressure and superior conditioning. Martinez's match was particularly interesting to Sarah. He faced an opponent who had a significant size advantage, but Martinez used superior technique and strategy to control the fight. His approach was patient and methodical, waiting for openings and capitalizing on his opponent's mistakes with devastating effectiveness. Watching the Marines compete gave Sarah a clearer understanding of their individual strengths and fighting styles. All four were clearly skilled fighters who had earned their reputations through legitimate ability. Their previous dismissal of her had been based on incomplete information rather than arrogance, though the result had been the same. After the final match of the evening, Tank gathered all the participants to review the night's events and provide feedback. His comments to Sarah were particularly significant. "Sarah, your performance tonight was excellent, but it also raised some questions about how we matched you. Going forward, we'll need to reassess your skill level and find appropriate training partners and sparring opportunities." The implication was clear. Sarah could no longer be treated as a beginner, which meant her training would need to be adjusted to match her actual capabilities. It also meant that the Marines, as the gym's most skilled fighters, would likely become her primary training partners for advanced work. As people began to leave the gym, Tommy approached Sarah one more time. "Hey, I want to say again that I was wrong about your background. We've been training here for 2 years and we thought we had everyone figured out. You showed us that we still have a lot to learn about reading people." "No worries," Sarah replied. "Assumptions are natural. What matters is how we adjust when we get new information." David Martinez, who had been listening to the conversation, added his own perspective. "Tank's right that you'll need different training partners now. If you're interested, we usually do advanced sparring sessions on Saturday mornings. You'd be welcome to join us." The invitation was significant. The Marines had gone from viewing her as an amateur seeking attention to recognizing her as a peer worthy of serious training partnership. It represented exactly the kind of acceptance she had hoped to eventually earn at Iron Wolf. "I'd like that," Sarah said. "What time do you usually start?" 8 o'clock, replied. "We do an hour of technical work followed by live sparring. Fair warning, we don't take it easy on each other. Everyone's expected to give their best effort." Sarah smiled. "I wouldn't want it any other way." As she drove home that night, Sarah reflected on how dramatically the evening had changed her position within the gym's hierarchy. The careful strategy of demonstrating her capabilities through legitimate competition had worked exactly as she had hoped. The Marines now viewed her as a skilled fighter worthy of respect rather than a gym tourist playing at being tough. But the evening had also revealed something else that was potentially more significant. The Marines' reaction to her performance suggested that they were genuinely interested in training with skilled partners and improving their abilities. Their initial dismissiveness had been based on false assumptions rather than closed-mindedness, which meant that building a productive training relationship was possible. The real test would come during the advanced training sessions. Competing against had demonstrated Sarah's technical skills, but training with the Marines would reveal whether she could hold her own against opponents who were prepared for her capabilities and fighting at full intensity. More importantly, it would determine whether the respect she had earned through one impressive performance could be maintained when subjected to the grinding test of daily training, alongside some of the gym's most skilled fighters. The foundation for a new dynamic had been established, but the real work of building mutual respect and productive training partnerships was just beginning. Challenge Night had answered some questions about Sarah's capabilities, but it had also raised new ones about how those capabilities would hold up against fighters who were now prepared to test them seriously. As she pulled into her apartment complex, Sarah found herself looking forward to Saturday morning with an anticipation that was both excited and nervous. The Marines had extended an invitation to join their advanced training, but she knew that acceptance into their tight-knit group would require more than one good performance. She would need to prove herself worthy of the partnership day after day, training session after training session. The challenge was exactly what she had been hoping for when she first walked into Iron Wolf Gym. Now she would find out if she was ready for what came next. Saturday morning arrived with Sarah feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she prepared for her first advanced training session with the Marines. She arrived at Iron Wolf Gym 15 minutes early, wanting to complete her warm-up routine before the others arrived. The gym was quieter than usual, with only a few dedicated athletes taking advantage of the early morning hours for personal training. The Marines arrived precisely at 8 o'clock, their punctuality reflecting the military discipline that characterized their approach to everything. They moved through their warm-up routine with the same methodical efficiency Sarah had observed during her weeks of watching them, but this time she was included in their preparation rather than observing from a distance. "We usually start with technical drilling," Sergeant explained as they gathered on the mats. "Work on specific techniques for about 30 minutes, then move to situational sparring and finish with live rolling. Everyone rotates through different partners so you get experience with different styles. David Martinez added his own perspective. The goal is to push each other to improve while staying safe. We're not trying to prove anything, we're trying to get better. Sarah appreciated the clarification. Some gyms developed cultures where advanced training became about establishing dominance rather than mutual improvement. The Marines' approach suggested they understood the difference between productive training and counterproductive ego contests. They began with striking combinations, focusing on setups and counters that could be effective against skilled opponents. Sarah found herself paired initially with Jake Williams, whose technical precision provided an excellent learning opportunity. He moved with the kind of flowing efficiency that came from thousands of hours of practice, but he was also generous with tips and corrections. "Your timing is really good," Williams observed as they worked through a complex combination. "But try turning your hip more on that hook. You'll get better power transfer and it's harder for your opponent to see the punch coming." The technical feedback was exactly what Sarah had hoped for when seeking out a serious training environment. Williams treated her as an equal worthy of his best instruction rather than a student who needed to be carefully managed. The respect was flattering, but also carried responsibility to live up to the higher expectations. After rotating through technical work with each of the Marines, they moved to situational sparring. This involved starting from specific positions and working to achieve defined objectives, escaping from bad positions, maintaining control from dominant positions, and transitioning between striking and grappling ranges. Tommy, who had been the most skeptical about Sarah's abilities, proved to be an ideal training partner for this type of work. His aggressive style and excellent conditioning forced her to work at a pace that revealed any weaknesses in her technique or fitness. But his intensity was controlled and purposeful rather than wild or dangerous. "You're not giving up position easily," commented during a break between rounds. "That's good. A lot of people with strong striking backgrounds struggle with maintaining position when the fight goes to the ground." Sarah nodded, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Grappling was always part of my training. I learned early that you can't be one-dimensional if you want to be effective." The comment drew interested looks from the Marines, who were beginning to piece together clues about her background. Her technique showed influences from boxing, judo, and Brazilian, integrated in a way that suggested comprehensive training under multiple expert instructors. David Martinez, who had been quietly observing her performance throughout the session, finally asked the question that had been on everyone's mind. "What level did you compete at before moving here? Your technique integration is too advanced for someone who just trained casually." Sarah hesitated, unsure how much detail to provide. The truth was that her competitive background was more extensive than anyone at Iron Wolf realized, but she had moved to the area specifically to escape the pressure and expectations that came with her previous reputation. "I fought professionally for several years," she said finally. "Did pretty well, but I got burned out on the politics and pressure that comes with high-level competition. I moved here for a fresh start and just wanted to train for the love of it again." The revelation explained everything about her performance while simultaneously raising new questions about exactly how successful she had been as a professional fighter. Professional experience would account for her technical skill, competitive composure, and understanding of training methodology. Sargent was the first to respond. "That makes sense. The way you handled last night was way too polished for an amateur. Professional experience explains the difference." Tommy shook his head in amazement. "And we thought you were just another fitness enthusiast. Shows what we know about reading people." Jake Williams was more interested in the practical implications. "How high did you compete? Were you fighting for major organizations?" Sarah smiled but remained vague. "High enough to make a living at it, but that's in the past now. I'm here because I want to train with people who push me to improve without all the other baggage." The Marines exchanged glances, clearly recognizing that she was being diplomatic about the details of her career. But they also understood her desire for privacy and didn't press for more specific information. David Martinez changed the subject by suggesting they move to the final portion of their training, live rolling. 5-minute rounds, full resistance. Everyone rotates so you get different looks. This was the ultimate test of Sarah's ability to train as an equal with the Marines. Live rolling meant that each person would be trying their best to control and submit their partner, with no artificial limitations on technique or intensity. It was the closest thing to actual fighting without the formal structure of competition. Sarah's first round was with David Martinez, whose reputation as the most technically sound of the group preceded him. He approached the round with calm intelligence, probing for weaknesses and gradually increasing pressure when he found openings. What followed was 5 minutes of intense but respectful combat that showcased both fighters' skills. Martinez's technique was exceptional, but Sarah's defensive skills and counterattacking ability kept her competitive throughout the round. Neither was able to achieve a decisive advantage, though Martinez gained dominant positions several times through superior technique. "Nice round," Martinez said as they bumped fists at the end. "Your guard game is really solid. I had to work for every position." The compliment meant more to Sarah than Martinez probably realized. His approval represented acceptance into the elite level of the gym's hierarchy, recognition that she belonged among serious fighters rather than being accommodated as a talented amateur. Her subsequent rounds with Williams and followed similar patterns. Each Marine brought different strengths and strategies, forcing Sarah to adapt her approach and demonstrate the versatility that had made her successful as a professional fighter. His wrestling background made him extremely difficult to control once he established dominant position, but Sarah's guard work and submission attempts kept him honest and prevented him from becoming comfortable. Williams used his striking background to create unique combinations of punches and takedowns that required constant adjustment. His relentless pace tested her conditioning, while his scrambling ability made every position dynamic. By the end of the 2-hour session, Sarah was exhausted but exhilarated. The quality of training was exactly what she had been seeking when she joined Iron Wolf Gym. More importantly, the Marine's acceptance of her as a legitimate training partner meant that she would have access to this level of instruction on a regular basis. As they cooled down and discussed the session, Sargent made an observation that summarized the morning's significance. "You know, this is the first time in months that all 4 of us got pushed hard in the same session. Having someone with your skill level to train with is going to make all of us better." Tommy nodded in agreement. "I was thinking the same thing. We've gotten pretty comfortable training with each other. Having a new perspective and skill set to work with changes everything." Jake Williams was more direct in his appreciation. "I'm embarrassed about how wrong we were about your background, but I'm glad we figured it out. This is the kind of training that actually improves your fighting." David Martinez, ever thoughtful, raised a practical point. "We should probably let Tank know that Sarah's background is more extensive than originally indicated. He'll want to adjust how he programs her training." Sarah appreciated the Marines' willingness to advocate for appropriate training opportunities. Their support would carry significant weight with Tank and would help ensure that she could continue training at the level her skills demanded. As they prepared to leave the gym, Tommy made a suggestion that surprised everyone. "You know, there's a tournament coming up next month, regional grappling competition with divisions for different experience levels. We were all planning to compete. You interested?" The invitation to compete alongside the Marines represented full acceptance into their group. Tournaments were serious commitments that required trust in training partners and confidence in their preparation methods. "What's the format?" Sarah asked, intrigued by the possibility. "Brazilian rules, gi and no-gi divisions, organized by belt rank and weight class. Good competition, well organized, attracts fighters from all over the region," explained. David Martinez added context that made the invitation more significant. "We've competed in this tournament for the past 2 years as a team. Having 4 people makes training more efficient because we can prepare for different styles and strategies." Sarah found herself drawn to the idea. Competition had been a major part of her previous career, and she missed the focused preparation and ultimate test that tournaments provided. More importantly, competing with the Marines would solidify her position within their training group. "I'd be interested," she said. "What's the timeline for registration?" 2 weeks, Jake Williams replied. "That gives us about 6 weeks to prepare, plenty of time to work on specific techniques and strategies." Sargent outlined the commitment involved. "If you're in, we train together 3 times a week leading up to the competition. Technique sessions, sparring, conditioning, and mental preparation. Everyone's expected to be serious about preparation and support the team." The structure appealed to Sarah's professional mindset. Proper preparation required systematic training and mutual accountability, qualities that had been missing from some of her previous competitive experiences. "Count me in," she said. "What do I need to do to register?" As they finalized plans for tournament preparation, Sarah realized that her carefully planned integration into Iron Wolf Gym had exceeded her best-case expectations. Not only had she earned acceptance from the gym's most skilled fighters, but she was now being invited to represent the gym in competition as part of their team. The Marines' initial dismissiveness had been transformed into genuine respect and partnership, proving that demonstrated competence could overcome even the strongest preconceptions. More importantly, their willingness to include her in their competitive plans showed that they viewed her as a valuable addition to their group, rather than just an interesting training partner. As she drove home from the gym, Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction that had been missing from her training for months. The combination of high-level instruction, challenging partners, and competitive goals created exactly the environment she needed to continue improving as a fighter. But she also recognized that the real test of her integration into the Marines group was still ahead. Tournament preparation would require a level of commitment and trust that went beyond weekly training sessions. Everyone would need to push their limits while supporting their teammates, creating bonds that extended beyond technical instruction to genuine partnership. The foundation had been established through demonstrated competence and earned respect. Now the real work of building a championship team could begin. 6 weeks of intensive tournament preparation had transformed the dynamic between Sarah and the 4 Marines from cautious acceptance to genuine partnership. The training sessions had become increasingly sophisticated as each member of the team pushed the others to refine their techniques and develop new strategies. What had begun as an invitation extended out of courtesy had evolved into a collaborative effort where Sarah's contributions were valued as much as anyone else's. The tournament was being held at a large sports complex 2 hours away, and the Iron Wolf team had decided to make the trip together. As they loaded their gear into Sergeant SUV early Saturday morning, the nervous energy of competition mixed with the confidence that came from thorough preparation. "Everyone clear on the game plans?" asked as they pulled onto the highway. Over the past weeks, they had developed specific strategies for each competitor based on their strengths and likely opposition. Sarah's extensive professional experience had proven invaluable in this preparation, her insights into high-level competition helping to refine everyone's approach. "Sarah, you're registered in the brown belt division, no-gi, 140-pound weight class," Jake Williams reviewed from his notes. "Based on the registration list, you should have about 8 competitors in your bracket." David Martinez, who had become Sarah's primary training partner due to their similar technical approaches, added his analysis. "Most of them are going to try to match strength with you early. Your conditioning advantage should become more apparent in the later rounds." Tommy was characteristically direct. "Just remember what we worked on. Let them expend energy trying to match your pace, then capitalize when they start to fade." Sarah appreciated the strategic support. The Marines had approached tournament preparation with the same methodical planning they brought to military operations, analyzing video of potential opponents and developing specific tactics for different scenarios. The tournament venue was impressive, with multiple competition areas set up throughout a large gymnasium. Hundreds of competitors from across the region were warming up, their coaches providing last-minute instruction and encouragement. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and nervous energy. After checking in and receiving their competition schedules, the Iron Wolf team found space to begin their warm-up routines. Sarah went through the same preparation ritual she had used throughout her professional career: light cardio, dynamic stretching, technical drilling, and mental visualization. "How are you feeling?" David Martinez asked as she finished her technical warm-up. "Good," Sarah replied, and she meant it. The weeks of preparation had given her confidence in her conditioning and strategy. More importantly, having the Marines' support provided a sense of team unity that had been missing from much of her previous competitive experience. The first few hours of the tournament featured preliminary divisions, giving the Iron Wolf team opportunities to observe the competition level and scout potential opponents. Sarah's division was scheduled for mid-afternoon, which meant she had time to watch the Marines compete in their respective brackets. Sargent was the first to compete, facing a field of experience in the heavyweight brown belt division. His first match showcased the wrestling skills that made him such a formidable training partner. He controlled the action from the opening seconds, using superior positioning and pressure to dominate a larger opponent who relied too heavily on strength rather than technique. "Beautiful takedown," Sarah commented as secured a decisive victory with a submission in the second round. "His timing is perfect." Tommy's matches were exercises in relentless aggression and superior conditioning. He faced opponents who tried to match his pace early, but invariably faded under his constant pressure. His final victory came against a skilled opponent who had the technical ability to compete with him, but lacked the cardiovascular preparation to maintain effectiveness for an entire match. Jake Williams demonstrated why his striking background translated so effectively to grappling competition. His understanding of distance and timing allowed him to set up takedowns with combinations that resembled his striking setups. His opponents found themselves constantly reacting to threats they couldn't anticipate, never able to implement their own game plans. David Martinez's approach was the most methodical, using superior technique and strategic thinking to overcome opponents who might have had physical advantages. His matches were technical masterpieces that showcased the value of patience and precision over explosiveness and aggression. By the time Sarah's division was called, all four Marines had advanced to their respective finals, setting up the possibility of a clean sweep for Iron Wolf Gym. The pressure of maintaining that perfect record added an extra element to Sarah's preparation, but it was a familiar feeling from her professional career. Her first opponent was a talented young woman named Jessica who had compiled an impressive record at local tournaments. Jessica's strategy was immediately apparent. Use superior speed and agility to create scrambles and submission opportunities before Sarah could establish control. Sarah's response demonstrated why her professional experience was so valuable. Instead of trying to match Jessica's pace, she used defensive positioning and patience to neutralize the early attacks. When Jessica inevitably began to tire from her explosive efforts, Sarah capitalized with a takedown that led to a dominant position and eventual submission. The second-round match was against a more experienced competitor named who had developed a reputation for strong defensive skills and dangerous counterattacks. His approach was to make matches ugly and grind out victories through superior conditioning and mental toughness. This match played directly to Sarah's strengths. Her professional career had included numerous fights against opponents who employed similar tactics, and she had developed specific strategies for breaking down defensive-minded fighters. She used constant pressure and position advancement to force into increasingly desperate defensive measures until an opening appeared for a match-ending submission. The semifinal brought Sarah face-to-face with the tournament's defending champion, a Brazilian black belt named Carolina who was competing down a belt level due to recent promotion timing. Carolina's reputation preceded her. She was known for technical excellence and the ability to find submissions from positions where other fighters could only maintain control. This was the level of competition that Sarah had missed during her time away from serious training. Carolina's skills were immediately evident in the way she moved and positioned herself, each adjustment serving multiple purposes and every defensive measure setting up potential counterattacks. The match became a chess game played at high speed, with both women demonstrating the kind of technical proficiency that separated elite competitors from talented amateurs. Sarah's professional experience proved crucial in the exchanges, her understanding of timing and risk management allowing her to take calculated chances that gradually accumulated advantages. The decisive moment came in the final minute when Carolina attempted a complex submission sequence that would have ended the match if successful. Sarah's defensive response was perfect, not only escaping the immediate danger, but transitioning to a dominant position that led to her own submission victory with seconds remaining. As Sarah advanced to the finals, she realized that the Marines had all won their respective semifinals as well. Iron Wolf Gym was guaranteed to take home 5 championship medals, an unprecedented achievement for any single gym at this tournament. The final match was against a competitor named Maria who had dominated her side of the bracket through a combination of technical skill and aggressive intensity. Maria's approach was to overwhelm opponents with constant attacks, never allowing them time to settle into their preferred positions or implement their game plans. Sarah's strategy for the final reflected everything she had learned during her weeks of preparation with the Marines. Instead of trying to impose her will immediately, she focused on defensive excellence and patience, waiting for the right moment to capitalize on Maria's inevitable mistakes. The match was a showcase of high-level grappling, with both women demonstrating why they had reached the tournament final. Maria's aggressive style created numerous exciting exchanges, but Sarah's defensive skills and counterattacking ability kept her competitive throughout. In the final 2 minutes, Sarah's superior conditioning and experience began to show. Maria's attacks became slightly less precise as fatigue affected her timing, and Sarah recognized the opening she had been waiting for. A perfectly timed takedown led to a dominant position that she maintained until the final seconds, securing a victory by points in a match that could easily have gone either way. As the referee raised Sarah's hand in victory, she looked to the sideline where the 4 Marines were celebrating as enthusiastically as if they had won their own matches. Their support throughout the tournament had been unwavering, their technical advice between rounds invaluable, and their confidence in her abilities a crucial factor in her success. The medal ceremony was a moment of triumph for the entire Iron Wolf team. All 5 competitors had won their respective divisions, a clean sweep that established the gym's reputation at the regional level. More importantly for Sarah, it represented complete acceptance into a group that had initially dismissed her as an amateur seeking attention. During the drive home, the conversation centered not on the day's victories, but on plans for future competitions and continued training improvements. The Marines discussed technical adjustments they wanted to make based on the day's performances, while Sarah shared insights from her matches that could benefit everyone's development. "You know what's interesting," Tommy observed as they neared home, "is how much better we all fought today compared to previous tournaments. Having a 5th person for training preparation made a huge difference." David Martinez nodded in agreement. "The technical feedback and different looks we got during sparring translated directly to better performance under pressure." Sargent, who had been quiet for most of the drive, finally spoke up. "I owe Sarah an apology that goes beyond what I said after challenge night. We judged her based on incomplete information and almost missed out on training with someone who could make us all better fighters." Jake Williams was characteristically direct. "We were idiots to assume anything about her capabilities based on her appearance or our preconceptions. The lesson is to evaluate people based on what they actually do, not what we think they should be able to do." Sarah appreciated the acknowledgement, but more importantly, she valued what the partnership had become. The Marines had evolved from dismissive critics to genuine teammates who pushed her to improve while supporting her goals. The transformation had been mutual. Her professional insights and technical skills had enhanced their preparation, while their disciplined approach and team mentality had rekindled her passion for serious training. As they pulled into the Iron Wolf parking lot, Tank emerged from the gym to congratulate the returning champions. Word of their clean sweep had already reached him through social media posts from other competitors, and his pride in the team's achievement was evident. "5 championships," he said with obvious satisfaction. "That's the kind of performance that builds a gym's reputation. More importantly, it shows what happens when skilled people support each other instead of competing against their own teammates." The comment resonated with Sarah because it captured exactly what had made the experience so valuable. The Marines had transformed from competitors who saw her as an outsider to partners who recognized her as an integral part of their success. Looking back on the journey from her first day at Iron Wolf Gym to standing in the parking lot wearing a championship medal, Sarah realized that the dismissive laughter and skeptical comments she had initially encountered had been necessary parts of the process. They had forced her to prove herself through actions rather than claims, building relationships based on demonstrated competence rather than assumed credentials. The 4 Marines who had once laughed at her in practice had become the teammates who celebrated her victories as their own. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but it had been thorough and genuine. Most importantly, it had been earned through the kind of mutual respect that could only develop between people who had tested each other's limits and found them worthy of trust. As the team made plans for their next training session, Sarah felt the satisfaction that comes from finding exactly what you're looking for in an unexpected place. Iron Wolf Gym had provided not just the challenging training environment she needed, but also the partnership and support that made the pursuit of excellence sustainable over time. The woman who had walked through those gym doors 6 weeks earlier seeking acceptance had instead found something more valuable: teammates who pushed her to be better than she thought possible, and the opportunity to do the same for them in return. It was a reminder that the best victories are often the ones that lift everyone involved rather than diminishing others in pursuit of personal success.